Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Dotan Sagi. Dotan, great uh, discussion there on war games and exercises and plans and assumptions. In the first segment, Dotan, you talked about KPIs, now key performance indicators, but what kind of KPIs? What are some examples?
Okay, so I'll say again what we describe as a KPI. KPI is an event, an action that has to take place at a certain point in time with certain persons, departments, people, doesn't matter. I call them players that are involved within this,
Mhm.
and certain actions have to take place. For instance, if I want a KPI that was achieved at 100%, from the moment there was an active shooter event and someone had to declare active shooter or use a code word or declare crisis in a cyber event, data breach, doesn't matter. But there is in the procedure, there's a declaration of crisis because that leads to certain actions that will then happen. Without that definition, this is a crisis, those actions will not happen.
Mm.
So that could be a KPI. And that event, in many cases, is timed. It has to happen within an X minutes of the event starting or related to a previous event. So it's the declaration itself. It's who's declaring it. So we may have it may happen at the right time, but the wrong Alex is declaring the crisis. So have we achieved the KPI? The KPI is achieved, but not 100%. Now we can go back and examine who needs to declare and what defines as part of this KPI, who receives this information. Did everyone receive it? Did everyone that needed to get the notification or whatever happens? And were the right words used? Was intent discovered here? When you declare crisis, there is an intent, a certain intent, and you're declaring something. If another type of KPI could be 72 hours in Europe after you had a data breach, you have to report this to certain authorities, your clients, and so on and so forth. That is a KPI because if you do not do it, there are legal ramifications of everything that you happen. It has to happen at a certain time. Someone has to do it, and certain intent or words that show us the intent have to be used there. So one of the main challenges many organizations have is they have these beautiful procedures, as I said, but when you ask them, okay, but what's important? Everyone says everything's important.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it may not evolve exactly like that. So if it evolves a little different, what has to happen if it goes right or left? Or what are those things? And then they say, yeah, what's important is we need to declare crisis. That's the basis. In order to declare crisis, we need to have a situational awareness, understand the event, maybe make a few decisions. We have to report to certain, it can be the board, it can be to the stock market, it can be to the regulator.
Mm.
So those could be, for instance, two types of KPI. And you're very surprised that there are many general KPIs, declaring the crisis, reporting, so on and so forth. But an organization on the same scenario may have, because of its political structure, because of the way they are built, maybe additional KPIs. Maybe in one organization, alerting the board of directors is a KPI. Why? Because it's a family-owned organization and the board is very, very strong and maybe involved in whatever decisions you make forward. In others, maybe alerting the board is at the end, after you've gone through the crisis and so on and so forth. So many organizations have to sit down and say, this KPI, this action is a KPI, this has to happen. And from there, you can start measuring. And you can say a KPI has been achieved fully, and maybe it's been achieved only 25%. Maybe the right thing happened with the right people, but it was a little late. And at the end of the day, you can go back and change. I'm saying it's not receiving the result that you thought you would get is not a failure. It's a learning point. Maybe the protocol should be changed. Maybe the people should be changed or trained. There are many, many, things you can learn from it.
You took the
And
word
that's
out of my mouth because I was going to say, after the fact, you're kind of going through a lessons learned. So
exactly.
you took that right out. But it's not just against a procedure. It's against a lot more than that, isn't it?
It is. It is. There's so much more that is involved here. Um, we don't just compare it to the procedure. We learn, the system learns
Mhm.
what words you're using, how you're using them, how are people influenced by those words, who influences whom. We're getting into the metrics here a little, so we'll get there in a second, but who's under pressure, what kind of pressure, where's the pressure originating from? There's so many learning points here. Now, if a KPI is achieved fully or not, now I can say, why is it not being achieved? The system can ask. What we have is we ask in various ways in order to learn what's happening here. How are people, how is the cognitive process here? Do they understand what's happening? That we talked about the 38%. Do they know what they should be doing? Do they have new knowledge? We've learned today that in 18% of the events where people don't work according to the procedure, it's because they thought they knew better. Uh, um,
I've worked
now,
with people like that.
Now, sometimes they're right. Maybe the protocol isn't good enough. Maybe they've
Yeah,
brought
yeah.
knowledge from a different place. So if you learn new knowledge within your simulation, I can press a button and it can be added now to my flow chart, to my procedure as a new branch of reaching my KPIs. But I will tell you this, out of those 18% that think they know better than the procedure, how many are male and how many are female, in your opinion?
I'm
Is
going to
there
say
is there a difference?
most are male, think they know.
96.4%.
Oh my God. Yikes.
So I'm not saying good or bad, but I am saying when people talk about diversity, this is it. Because if you have an incident response team that's built only on one gender, they will probably either only work with the procedure and not make decisions out of it, or have this thinking that they know better. Having the diversity in incident response team is an important part of being able to analyze and understand what's happening. And we see that a lot.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed a number that high, but 96% of that 18. Wow.
It's high. It's high. Yes, there are geographical differences and cultural differences, but when I take, the whole sum, yeah, it is there.
Wow. So putting my project management hat on, I was thinking as you were speaking there with the KPIs that they're kind of milestones along the way. This is what we need to accomplish in our response plan or whatever we need to do. Can it be as simple as a checklist? These are the things we need to do in this order that we need to get to, and something along those lines to
It
help
is.
people guide them along.
It is, which is why it can also be used as a support tool in real time. It can, if you understand how you're achieving your KPIs, it can help you reach future ones. Because as I said, if I learn how you make your decisions and I see how you're achieving your KPIs, I can predict future KPIs. Not every event is a 3-hour tabletop exercise. Real events have longer and can take days. The
Mhm.
ability in today to say that KPIs of the future may be influenced by the decisions we made today are critical as a support tool for decision makers. So we see them. You said milestones. They're like anchors. You started the event. You're on the way to the horizon. You have it mapped out. You know where you have to pass. And as you start diverting from those anchors and you see there's a delta between the KPIs and what you thought you would do and what you're really doing, or what you're supposed to do and what you're really doing, you have to understand what will it take in order to move back to that path. Or, by the way, maybe I should plan a new path. That's also okay in an event. Sometimes we may decide that we need a new path.
Well, you kind of mentioned that in the first segment where you will have your decisions that need to be made, but as things unfold or new things come to light, the decisions that need to be made will change and others are no longer needed, right?
That is
So the person, we already said our plans and procedures, but the people involved responding also need to be, I guess, aware of the situation, but adaptable to situations as it unfolds.
exactly, which
Responsive,
is exactly the ability to work together, in my opinion, and we've learned that from simulations, is as crucial as having the hardware, the software, and having the procedure itself. If we don't know how to talk to each other, if we don't know how to give information and understand, if this is the first time we're doing it, we will probably fail. Very few times will we succeed. Enabling a crisis language and understanding of how we need to move forward is very, very important. The more intimate the team is, the better the results are. And then you can also start predicting according to that. You don't have to test a million scenarios because you know that they will usually work in a certain way. And that's what we call resilience, right? They're resilient and they can work with different scenarios in the same way. Why? Because they know how to work together. They achieve whatever KPIs, they work together, they achieve what they want, and they know how to do it. And you need to learn from that.
And that only comes about by practice.
It only
It
comes to
doesn't come
practicing.
about by, how'd you describe it in the first segment? Looking at, all the slides that are, pretty slides hanging on the wall.
Exactly. What would you do? I would do this. It's very easy saying I would do this until someone sends you a message and the words there cause you to, close down, maybe, even mentally. For instance, in Hebrew, the most used word in crisis is the word no. Even when we say positive things, we use the word no in the language. It's a language thing. So a lot of times when we talk with other people, people close down, even during a crisis. So it's understanding who's on the other side and how those words may affect them. Even the number of words, by the way. So there are different parameters that you can learn from how to work better.
Well, let's go into that direction now with decisions, how to work better, how to make better decisions. Where does that all start? Because every disaster unfolds differently. That's why they are disasters. Every person is different. So how do you bring all that together so that the right decisions can be made at the right time, in the right way, and as you just mentioned, in a collaborative way with others, not just one person who comes in trying to make all the decisions and messes things up like that 96% you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. So first of all, let's understand how decisions are made within the organization. How are they made? How does the information flow? Who talks to whom? When do they talk to them? How do they talk to them? Do they prefer formal or informal ways of communication? That means something. The ability to understand who is influencing whom within the organization, who is under pressure while you're managing that crisis. All of those affect the level of the decision-making process. Now, the more people they know how to work together, they understand who's under pressure, they know they're ready for those that lead, or we call them influencers within the organization. You know how to work with them. So we examine, while people are interacting with each other, 13 different parameters. So I'm not going to give you all the parameters now, but how do people influence? I can come into someone's office. I can walk into the office, I won't say the company that's next door to us, and I can walk in and give everyone an order. So I perceive myself as a leader. I'm getting in and I'm giving people orders. Now, if they do what I say, then maybe it's true. Maybe I am a leader. I'm an influencer. Hey, everyone go home. They get up and they go home. So I perceive myself as X and they perceived it the same way and they did it. But if I go into that office and I say, go home, and everyone looks at me and says,
Who are you?
Who are you? What are you doing here? That means something. It has many, many meanings within the organization, and you can learn from that. You can learn who influences whom, who needs information in order to influence, who accepts it. And it's not always a hierarchical process. It's
just going to ask you
not
that.
always, exactly. It's not always that the CEO or the boss or whatever the organization is. Sometimes the most influential person can be that one person has a small office next to the water fountain that no one wants to talk to. He or she have been there for I don't know how many years, but they have so much knowledge. And when they talk, people listen in a crisis. The ability to understand who are those people within the organization is critical, because if you know who they are, you can prepare them and the organization to move faster to dealing with the crisis. Or teach people how to be influencers. That's also, it can be in a leadership program, mentorship. It can be many, many different ways. Who are those that are the influencers, and who would you expect to be an influencer? If I have a cyber event, maybe it's the CISO, maybe it's the CTO, maybe it's the legal, by the way. When we started doing these data privacy simulations a few years ago, you would see the tech side were the center. Today, we have new players that have become major influencers. As organizations grow and the types of crisis change, we find that main influencers are the legal department. They've become a big, big player and an influencer here, but also the spokesperson. The spokesperson is someone crucial to the success of such an event in the way that they manage it, and so on and so forth. So this ability to understand who are the influencers, who would you expect that to be the influencers, are they the real ones, and what's happening over there. So that would be one metric that would enable you, to learn how you work and get better. And there are many, many others, from the words you use, as I said, to the pressure, and so on and so forth.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Dotan Sagi today about decision-making during crises and war games, and we will be right back.
If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.